Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Jessa and today's video is going to be the Booktube Newbie Tag. So I have been on Booktube for a couple of months now, and I know that this is typically a video that people do right at the beginning of starting their channel, but I was a bit hesitant because I don't think I'm a very interesting person. However, my recent video that I just put up got a lot of attention that I was not expecting, and I've gained a lot more subscribers than I thought I would, and also just a lot more views. The video currently sits at I think about 6.5 thousand, which is ridiculous to think that 6,500 people have looked at me and listened to me talk is honestly crazy and mind-blowing. And I do want to try and introduce myself to you guys. I'm gonna answer some questions about myself and hopefully you guys like my answers. And so without further ado, let's just get right into the questions. And the first question is, why did you start this channel? I don't really have anyone in my personal life who is also interested in reading, so I wanted to find people to connect with and use books as a medium to talk about important social issues and sort of connect a lot of things around writing and reading. So I hope to someday be an author myself and maybe work in book related fields. So I think this is a pretty good starting point in terms of getting to know the book community and becoming an active member within it. And also just I think it's a good way to improve upon public speaking, which has never been a strong suit for me. I've always been a very introverted person. So this has been a really I guess step moving forward in my confidence journey. The second question is, what are some fun and unique things that you can bring to booktube? I think for me, I love to read a variety of books, and my educational background is sort of multidisciplinary one in history, literature, and politics, and I love to analyze books from the intersectional lens of these three topics, such as maybe looking at the politics behind a contemporary romance book or looking at the historical inspiration of a fantasy book. I also love writing as well, so I like reading books from the perspective of picking apart the prose and looking at the inspirations that authors take, and also looking at an author's writing style and how their past experiences and parts of their background affect their writing as well. So I hope to be able to do some more video essay type, what the previous video that kind of blew up was. So I hope to do more of those type of videos, sort of focused less on the book drama, but greater themes. I have some plans to do some videos around looking at fantasy romance as a genre. So hopefully I will be able to do both the traditional booktuber stuff of monthly TBRs, book hauls, but also more in-depth analysis of book community at large and book genres and trends that we're seeing within books and book publishing. So I'd love to do just a lot of different things. The third question is, what are you excited for about this new channel? I think for me, the most exciting thing is being able to connect with new people and sort of working on public speaking and communication. I know that I'm not the best at that, and I have gotten some comments about, sorry if that does bother anyone. Part of why this is really important to me is the fact that I have always had social anxiety and sort of problems with communication that have come about as a result of being autistic. I have only recently been diagnosed with autism, but it is something that has informed me throughout my life, and I would like to learn to better those skills, but also, as being someone who is autistic, also provide, I guess, maybe some education about autistic lived experiences and what it means to be autistic in terms of communication difficulties that I do have. So I hope that people can be kind and understanding about that, and I will also try my best to make adjustments to that as well, though it will probably take some time because I'm not good at those things. The fourth question is, why do you love reading? And for me, I think reading is just always been because I love imagination and always really enjoyed the creative process behind both reading and writing. And reading for me has always allowed me to escape into these, different worlds. I've particularly always loved reading fantasy books, so I've always enjoyed the process of getting to know the lore and world building within these different worlds, getting to know all these different characters, different magic systems, so that's always been my favorite part about reading. And for me, especially, I mentioned before being autistic, I always really struggled with connecting with people around me. I remember being like as young as like 3 or 4 years old and just not being able to relate socially to my peers, and reading books was a way for me to learn social skills that I wasn't able to and that I still largely don't know. I was able to kind of like expand my vocabulary a lot more, and through analyzing stories and sort of the behaviors of characters, I was able to learn sort of more communication skills, although not really well. I'm also really interested in providing social commentary on books. I've always seen books as sort of a dialogue between yourself and the author and also the characters, and I think that there's a really big opportunity to create dialogue with other readers over books as well. I think that books allow us to explore various perspectives that we don't have access to, whether that be through creating completely unique worlds and exploring themes through magic or science and technology that we don't have access to, but also exploring different perspectives like people who have different lived experiences than us. So I think that books provide a really good opportunity for us to connect with one another, and even though we're doing this through an online medium and not in person, I still feel like there is a point of creating that dialogue, and hopefully we can do that together. The next question asks, what books series got you into reading? Like most people, I have to say it was Harry Potter was really the first series that I was interested in. I know that there is a lot of controversy around Harry Potter today, and I don't personally agree with a lot of things that the author has spoken about online, and I don't want to bring any of that hatred forth onto this platform, but it is where I did get my start at reading. I also read Twilight around the same time. I was maybe about 7 or 8 years old, so maybe a bit too advanced for the age that I was. I have a very vivid memory of dragging my dad to Blockbuster to get New Moon when it was released on disc, and also convinced him to get me an Edward Cullen poster. I don't know what that says about me. Some other ones that came about later were Percy Jackson, Lord of the Rings, and The Hunger Games. I read all those around the time that like the Percy Jackson movies and the Hunger Games films also came out. The Lord of the Rings films came out around the time that I was born, but I did watch them around the time I was about 9 years old and read the books soon after. I think for me, Lord of the Rings was a bit more of a bigger obsession than the other two, just because I loved the movies so much, and I also really loved Tolkien's world building, which I think a lot of Lord of the Rings fans also enjoy. The Silmarillion in particular was one that I really loved. I love elves. Those are like my favorite fantasy creatures and stuff like that, so I love the lore and world building around the elves and the Silmarillion. And then some later ones that I got into were Throne of Glass and Game of Thrones, which I feel a bit awkward saying this, but I was 11 when I started reading the Game of Thrones series, which is awkward to admit largely because of the content that it discusses, but I was obsessed with those books. I could have gone on about them for ages. I feel like that's where my love of like world building really started. Another one was the Shadowhunter series written by Cassandra Clare. When I started writing as a kid, my first ever like book that I tried to write was basically just a copy of Shadowhunters, where instead of being the Nephilim, they were just angels and demons, but it was just largely kind of copying a lot of the plot beats from that story. So I do have a very big fondness for the Shadowhunters world because it was one of the first series to get me interested in writing, and then Game of Thrones was one that kind of built a lot on those passions, especially around my interest in epic fantasy writing. The next question is, what questions would you ask your favorite booktubers? And I think my first question would be, how do you manage the workload that comes with doing booktube? So between filming, editing, reading books, coming up with unique ideas, writing reviews, filming reviews, and just lifestyle stuff like having a full-time job, going to school, having a social life, how do you manage all of these things? Because I really struggle, especially with filming videos. I think you can kind of tell with a lot of my videos the lighting ends up changing a lot because I tend to film later in the day because it's just more natural for me as a person, and I don't really like the whole like rush behind getting the camera ready and doing my makeup. So I don't know how people manage it and make it seem so effortless as well. And a lot of content creators as well, I see them even film like things like daily vlogs or like weekly vlogs. I really love Olivia Reads a Latte's channel, and she does these like weekly vlogs all the time, and I'm so interested in them. But I'm like, how do you make your daily life so interesting and so like aesthetically pleasing and stuff like that? I feel like I just have a very boring life, and I'm just a very boring person. And then question 7 is, what challenges do you think will be the hardest to overcome when starting a booktube channel? And for me, it's been confidence. At the beginning, I had a lot of trouble even just starting to film the videos. When I would try and like film things, I would literally sit here in this chair looking at this camera for like an hour before I would even be able to speak. And then I would have to film the first part like over and over again, trying to get the right wording or making sure that I was actually speaking, because I would get so nervous that the words just wouldn't come out. I think this comes a lot because I'm worried about people judging me. Like I kind of mentioned with that one video, like I had a couple of people like commenting on my appearance or like my voice and stuff like that, and I know that I come across as very unnatural in terms of maybe the way that I look or the way that I speak, and that's largely because I am autistic, and those things are associated with being autistic, and autistic people do tend to have this almost sort of defamiliarizing aspect to us in which we do look like everyone else, but we kind of act a little bit off, which is a bit unsettling and can be particularly unsettling when it's through an online medium like this, because you kind of expect a lot more polished stuff. So I am trying to kind of correct those behaviors, but part of the journey of like self-acceptance and like accepting yourself for being autistic is also accepting characteristics that others find uncomfortable about being autistic. So I'm not trying to use that as like an excuse to like get away with not listening to people's advice. I am trying my best, but I think what's most important is that I'm being authentic to myself and that I'm speaking honestly and just like getting what I have to say out, as opposed to making sure that what I'm saying is completely perfect. The next question is, when did you start reading? Early childhood. I fell out of reading during high school, mainly due to external judgment from my peers and sort of a desire to fit in, but I started getting back into it during the early stages of the pandemic. The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes was one of the books that got me back into reading, kind of like a new book in the Hunger Games series, which I really liked when I was younger. And then another book that I had found was Circe by Madeline Miller, and I always really loved Greek mythology as a kid, so I was really interested. And then I also returned to reading the ACOTAR series by Sarah J. Maas again, and Sarah J. Maas was another. Those were kind of like the 3 books that really got me back into reading. The next question is, where do you read? And I have one answer to that, and it's mainly in my bed. I know that it's not very good to like stay in your bed, but I have a pretty small room. Aside from like this desk that I sit and film at, there's really only the bed to sit on. So, and then the next question asks, what kind of books do you read? And so I read all kinds of books, but primarily I'm interested in fantasy books, both YA and adult. I also like fantasy romance or romantasy. I like some contemporary romance, some sci-fi, and also I do tend to read a couple of memoirs throughout the year. I do tend to gravitate more towards female authors than male authors, though still have a lot of favorite male authors as well. And I do try my best to read diversely, such as books written by BIPOC authors, LGBTQA representation, and also disability representation. And I'm also always looking for more recommendations around diversifying my reading, because I think that's a really important part for reading about me, is being able to explore different experiences beyond my own. 11 asks, what does your book collection look like? And largely my book collection is pretty messy. I have a lot of books and very little space. I have these IKEA Billy bookshelves, and I have 3 of these big ones and then 2 small ones. Almost every single shelf is double stacked. There really isn't a lot more space in the room to add more shelves, so there's a lot of book piles on different surfaces and also on the ground. But I am very grateful to be able to have all these books. When I was younger, my family didn't really have a lot of money, so we didn't really get a lot of books when I was a kid, and so I think that is sort of what has led to a catalyst now of having so many books now, is that it's like I wasn't able to have those things as a kid. So I am very grateful that I'm able to have a home library and even just have a house in general, because a lot of people don't have those things. The 12th question is, what else do you like? And I like playing video games, is largely my other like big passion. My first ever like video game love was probably The Sims, but I also like games like Stardew Valley, Baldur's Gate 3, Genshin Impact, Honkai Star Rail, Fire Emblem, Dragon Age Strange is another one, and my most recent obsession has been Marvel Rivals. And I also really like the game Love and Deep Space as well. I also really like candles. Some of my favorite scents are vanilla, apple, peach, cinnamon, strawberries, and blueberries. I also really like baking, which kind of reminds me a lot of like candles because I get a lot of. And I also just love crafting stuff. I like diamond art and cross stitching. I used to love drawing when I was younger. I think that is about it. I'm sorry about the change in the lighting. I kind of did mention that I struggle to be able to start with filming, and hopefully you somewhat enjoyed listening to me talk about myself, and hopefully you decide to stick around. And also feel free to let me know what your answers to any of these questions would be, and also if you have a booktube channel, feel free to link it down below as well. I would love to connect with everyone more, and I hope that finding out these things about me helps you to connect more with me as well. And so thank you for listening, and goodbye.